Dr. Mira Caldwell was supposed to be proud of her job, overseeing historical restorations in the old Fairfax Asylum, a long-abandoned psychiatric hospital near the forested hills outside of town. When she first walked through Chamber 4, an iron-grated, cell-like room once used for sensory deprivation, there was only dust, peeling plaster, and the faint stink of damp mildew. But late that evening, as sunlight bled out across broken glass windows, she heard a whisper. It was almost indistinguishable, like dry leaves rustling, or the distant hum of wind through cracks. Mira paused, breath held, fingers stiff. There was no wind. Point 2. She returned the next night, flashlight trembling in her hand. Her light caught old scratch marks on the doorframe, what looked like long fingernail gouges. The heavy, padded door at the back of Chamber 4 was closed. She didn't remember it from earlier tours. She tried the handle, locked. From within came the whisper again, but this time more definite, a single word, leave. The voice sounded wet, as if it had been underwater. Mira, a scientist who believed in facts, felt her heart pounding like some wild animal trapped in her ribcage. Point 3. Over the next days, she researched. Fairfax records showed Chamber 4 had been used in the 1920s under Dr. Halloway, a man later dismissed for malpractice, reports of patients driven insane by prolonged isolation and sensory torments. One patient, a woman named Maeve Lennox, had gone missing under his care, her body never found, her name scrubbed from many documents but still appearing in whispered rumors among the hospital's old staff descendants. Sometimes people said, Maeve still walks chambers at night. For, unable to resist the pull, Mira arranged for a small overnight stay in the asylum, just her, recorder, camera, and emergency equipment. As midnight approached, sound changed, distant footsteps on a metal grate, slow but deliberate. She followed the sound into Chamber 4. The door, which she had locked from inside earlier, was now ajar. Her flashlight cut into shadows on the padded walls, deep bruises in the foam, irregular tears where fabric seemed fresh. She saw a dark shape crouched in the back corner. At first she thought mannequin, then a man, posture twisted, head down, deathly still. She whispered, Maeve? The figure lifted its head. Eyes too wide, skin gray, mouth stretched in a silent scream. Point 5. The scream came then. It was a guttural sound deeper than words, resonating in her bones. Mira dropped the flashlight, it clattered on the concrete. She scrambled toward the door. The whispering, now many voices, crawled up the walls, pleas, snarls, regrets. She bolted out, not stopping until the asylum gates were locked behind her. Her hands shook, chest heaving, her recorder had shut off. Later, when she reviewed footage from before the power cut, nothing showed the figure, nothing showed her flashlight, only empty shadows. But on the audio, very faint, a voice, barely audible, Maeve is hungry. It was almost midnight when Caleb Turner took the shortcut home along Birchwood Avenue, a stretch of cracked asphalt where rainwater pooled deep and storm drains gurgled like hollow throats. His friends always joked about the man in the drain, a local ghost story told by kids to scare each other into taking the long route. Caleb wasn't the kind to believe in urban legends. But that night, the rain didn't stop, and thunder rolled low like a growl that never ended. His boots slapped the wet pavement as lightning flashed, illuminating the large grated mouth of the storm drain near the end of the street. And in that split second of light, Caleb thought he saw fingers, pale and curled, gripping the metal bars from inside. Point 2. He froze. The rain hissed against his jacket, and water ran down into his collar. He crouched low, squinting through the drain. Nothing. Just darkness. He exhaled, nervous laughter bubbling out. Then, just as he stood to leave, a voice echoed from the drain, hoarse and wet, "Help me." The words were drawn out, trembling, as if they'd been trapped down there for years. Caleb stepped back. "Who's there?" he called. Silence. Then again, the same voice, this time weaker, "Please, pull me out." His flashlight beam trembled as he aimed it down between the bars. The light revealed only running water, until it hit a face. 3. It was a man's face, or what used to be one. The skin looked waterlogged and split like old paper, eyes bulging from rot and time. The lips quivered, releasing bubbles as black water filled its mouth. Caleb stumbled backward, dropping his flashlight into the current. He wanted to run, but the voice came again, now behind him, closer than the drain. "Don't leave me down here." The sound was wrong, too close, too real. He turned around, but the street was empty. Only the faint hum of rain and the slow echo of something scraping metal beneath the drain cover. 4. Caleb ran. Every few steps, he could hear the sound following, dragging metal, sloshing water, something crawling just below the ground, matching his pace. When he reached the corner of the street, a streetlight flickered overhead, then went out completely. In the darkness, he could hear the grate burst open behind him, a wet clang, followed by heavy breaths and the slick shuffle of feet on pavement. He turned once. That was his mistake. The thing that had once been a man rose from the drain, ribs like sharpened wire, water gushing from its mouth. Its face, the same one from the grate, locked eyes with him. Then everything went black. 5. The next morning, police found Caleb's phone and backpack near the storm drain, both soaked and caked in mud. The grate had been ripped out of the concrete, bent as if something huge had forced its way through. The water department later sealed the drain permanently, but locals still say that when it rains, you can hear Caleb's voice echoing down there, not the man's. Caleb's. Pleading for someone to let him out. The Wainwright family moved to the old farmhouse on Route 11 just after the harvest season. The place had been empty for years, but the price was too good to pass up: 5 bedrooms, a barn, and 20 acres of quiet, open land. "It just needs love," Nora Wainwright said as she wiped dust from the kitchen counter. Her husband, Dan, laughed and said the same thing every new homeowner says before the nightmares begin. The locals never said much, except one old man at the feed store who muttered, "Don't stay after sundown. That house talks when it's dark." Dan brushed it off as country superstition. He wouldn't laugh for long. 2. The first night, Nora heard the sound of knocking, soft, deliberate, like knuckles on wood. She thought it came from the attic, but when Dan went up there with a flashlight, nothing was out of place except the old rocking chair that seemed to face the wrong direction each time they checked. On the third night, the knocking changed. Instead of random tapping, it became rhythm: 3 knocks, pause, 2 knocks, pause. Then a faint voice echoed through the vents, "Nora." It was deep, male, and sounded like it came from inside the walls. She froze in bed, whispering her husband's name, but Dan was already sitting up, listening. 3. Over the next days, they heard it more often, sometimes whispering their names, sometimes repeating words they had said hours earlier. Dan recorded the sounds one evening, playing them back later only to hear something impossible: a whisper answering his question before he had even asked it. "Who's there?" he'd said in the recording. "You," the voice had replied. They tried sleeping in the truck one night, but by dawn, they found muddy footprints leading from the house to where they parked, small, barefoot prints that stopped right at the driver's door. 4. They called a local historian who told them the house had been owned in the 1930s by a preacher named Elias Gray, who'd gone mad after his family died of fever. He was said to have buried their bodies in the walls, sealing them with plaster to keep their souls home. The house had been rebuilt several times since, but the foundation was still original. "Some homes don't forget," the historian said grimly. Dan didn't believe it until he tried tearing down the living room wall to install a fireplace. Under the wallpaper, they found hair, long strands, trapped in the plaster. When he pulled another section loose, a piece of fabric fell out, the corner of a child's dress. 5. That night, Nora woke to the sound of crying downstairs. She followed it, flashlight shaking, until she reached the kitchen. The old radio on the counter had turned itself on, white noise hissing through the static. Then, slowly, the static formed words, "Stay." The kitchen light flickered, and a second voice whispered right beside her ear, a breath warm enough to move her hair. "You shouldn't have opened the wall." The next morning, the Wainwrights' truck was gone, keys still in the ignition. The house remains empty again, except for those who claim they've heard two new voices calling from within, a man and a woman, forever answering back. Deputy Laura Hayes was used to strange calls in Pine Hollow, missing hikers, drunken hunters, the occasional ghost story from a frightened teenager, but the report she got that cold November morning was different. A local hiker had found an old VHS tape in the forest, sealed inside a weatherproof plastic bag. It had no label, just a single word written in faded marker, "Play." The man said he tried to watch it, but his TV kept cutting to static after the first 30 seconds. He left it with Laura, saying the forest felt wrong ever since he touched it. She took it back to the sheriff's office out of curiosity, but the moment she popped the tape into the player, the air in the room seemed to shift, colder, denser, almost like someone else was breathing behind her. Point 2. The footage began with a forest clearing, the same one near Birch Hollow Creek, recognizable by its crooked pine tree and broken picnic table. The camera was shaky, held by someone breathing hard. In the background, faint whispers overlapped like a dozen voices speaking at once. Then the camera turned toward the ground, and there it was, a small hole, freshly dug, something inside it wrapped in burlap. Laura leaned closer to the screen. As the cameraman reached down to unwrap it, the feed began to distort, lines, static, the sound of crackling leaves, and then, suddenly, a woman's face filled the frame. She was staring directly into the lens, mouth wide as if screaming, but there was no sound. The screen went black. Point 3. The deputies who reviewed it later swore they saw something else in that final frame, a reflection behind the woman, a figure wearing an old asylum coat. Laura froze when she heard that. She had seen that same asylum coat earlier that week in an archived report from Fairfax Asylum, the one closed after a restorer vanished in Chamber 4. The name Dr. Halloway appeared in both files. Coincidence, maybe. But the tape had been buried less than 5 miles from the asylum's old property line. And when Laura went out to check the clearing herself, she found the same broken picnic table, and beside it, a second plastic bag. Empty, torn open. Point 4. That night, Laura's radio came alive around midnight with a call that shouldn't have come through. A static-laced voice whispered her name, Laura Hayes, followed by the sound of dripping water. She froze, staring at the receiver. The voice came again, clearer this time, "You shouldn't have watched it." The room temperature dropped, her breath misting in the dark. She turned off the radio, but the whisper didn't stop. It was coming from the tape, still sitting on her desk. The case file beside it flipped open on its own, a gust of cold air turning the pages until it landed on a photo, the Fairfax Asylum's Chamber 4. In the background, half in shadow, stood a shape. Watching. Point 5, the next morning, the tape was gone. Her office window was cracked open, footprints on the sill, bare, wet, leading out toward the tree line. The sheriff wrote it off as stress, but 2 days later, hikers found a third plastic bag in the woods, this one containing her badge and a short, distorted audio clip burned onto CD. The clip lasted just 7 seconds. You could hear the whisper of water, a woman gasping, then a faint male voice, "She knows now." The forest around Birch Hollow has been sealed to the public ever since. Locals say at night, if you stand near the police line, you can hear the sound of a VHS ejecting and the whisper of someone pressing play again. By the time 17-year-old Elena Marsh started keeping her dream journal, she hadn't slept through the night in months. Every time she closed her eyes, she found herself standing in ankle-deep water, a hallway flooded with murky liquid that rippled toward an unseen door at the far end. She would hear someone breathing behind her, slow and ragged, followed by a faint whisper, "Don't wake up." When she finally did wake, her bed was soaked, and her hands smelled like metal and mold. Her mother thought it was sleep paralysis. But Elena knew it wasn't. Because the next day, when she walked to school, she saw muddy footprints in the hallway. Bare, small, just like hers in the dream. Point 2. She began researching her dreams online, posting details on paranormal forums. One user responded instantly under the name M.Halloway. They told her to stop writing the dreams down, to never describe the hallway aloud. They warned her that water carries memory. She dismissed it as trolling, until the next dream, when she saw a writing on the wall above the waterline, "Elena, stop." The letters weren't painted. They were carved deep into the wall itself, the edges still bleeding dark. When she woke up, she found the same letters scratched faintly into her bedroom door. Her fingernails were torn and bleeding. Point 3. Her mother finally took her to a psychiatrist, who recommended therapy and medication. But the night before her first appointment, Elena recorded herself sleeping. The footage lasted only an hour before the camera flickered and filled with static. When it cleared again, the video showed Elena standing in the middle of her room, eyes open, dripping wet, whispering to someone off-screen. She said, "I found the door." The whisper that answered was faint, but when her mother replayed it later, she heard a man's voice. It sounded like it was underwater. And it said, "She's ready." 2 days later, Elena vanished. Her bedroom carpet was soaked, as though a pipe had burst, but no source of water was ever found. Police divers searched the nearby river for weeks, but all they recovered was her phone, sealed in a plastic bag, with one last video clip. In it, the camera sways through a dark hallway filled with water, identical to her dreams. At the end of the corridor stands a woman in an asylum gown, face hidden by dripping hair. The woman raises one finger to her lips. Then the video cuts out. The timestamp on the file shows it was recorded 3 hours after Elena disappeared. Point 5. When investigators reviewed her online activity, they traced the M.Halloway account back to a disconnected IP, one previously linked to Fairfax Asylum's digital archive, a system offline for over a decade. The case remains unsolved, but there's one final, chilling note. The detective assigned to Elena's disappearance reported hearing running water under his floorboards every night for weeks after closing the case. Then he stopped showing up to work. His house was found empty, lights on, and in the middle of his living room, an open laptop playing static. On the screen, a single sentence appeared, typing itself slowly, "She found the others." Marcus Heller wasn't a cop or journalist. He was a sound engineer who'd grown obsessed with a strange phenomenon he called echo residues, faint, distorted voices that appeared in audio recordings from certain places after violent events. His obsession began when a local officer sent him an old police recorder found near Pine Hollow, the same forest where Deputy Laura Hayes vanished. The file was corrupted, but when Marcus ran it through his restoration software, he noticed something eerie. Layered beneath the static, beneath Laura's final breath, was a second recording, one that shouldn't have been possible. It was the voice of a teenage girl whispering, "He's listening." The voice matched the missing girl, Elena Marsh. Point 2. He spent weeks comparing frequencies, cross-referencing patterns, and noticed something terrifying. All the recordings shared the same underlying hum, 19.6 Hz, the infrasound frequency often associated with dread and hallucination. But this wasn't background noise. It was consistent, deliberate, like a signal. When he amplified it, the waveform resembled something familiar, not a sound, but a symbol, a spiral, repeating endlessly. He thought it was a technical glitch until the sound began showing up in other projects, home movies, traffic cams, even his voicemail. Always that same faint hum, always near water. Point 3. His research led him to an old storage unit once rented by Dr. Michael Halloway, the disgraced physician from Fairfax Asylum. Inside, Marcus found hundreds of unmarked cassettes, each labeled only with dates and coordinates. He played one. It began with the sound of rain and a single female voice saying, "I'm in the hall again." He recognized it immediately, Elena. Another tape contained muffled sobs, followed by the clatter of metal and a man's whisper, "Maeve is hungry." The final tape he dared to play was almost silent, except for breathing. Then a knock, 3 taps, pause, 2 taps, the exact same rhythm reported in the house that answered back. Point 4. Marcus began to suspect that Holloway hadn't been studying patients at all. He'd been collecting them, not physically, but through recorded echoes of their trauma. Somehow, the sound trapped pieces of them, preserving their fear like an infection. The more people listened, the more the voices spread, leaking into other media, other devices. His laptop camera flickered on by itself one night, recording him while he slept. In the playback, a figure could be seen standing behind him, its face obscured by static, its mouth open as if whispering directly into the microphone. He froze the frame, enhanced it, and saw a glint of water dripping from its chin. Point 5. Marcus vanished 3 days later. His apartment was found abandoned, every mirror and window covered with black fabric. On his desk sat a flash drive labeled Echoes_Final. Investigators opened it, finding a single audio file. The moment they hit play, the room temperature dropped. A faint voice filled the speakers, Marcus, terrified, whispering, "He's inside the sound." Then another voice layered over his, low, smooth, and calm, "Thank you for listening." The file ended, but the waveform kept moving for several seconds afterward, spelling out the same spiral symbol before fading into silence. When freelance journalist Dana Croft received the anonymous package, she almost threw it away. It was small, wrapped in brown paper, no return address, just a spiral symbol drawn in black marker on the back. Inside were several items: a flash drive, a soaked page from a psychiatric intake form signed Maeve Lennox, and a handwritten note, "If you're reading this, he's already using your voice." Dana thought it was some ARG stunt or creepypasta pitch until she plugged in the drive. It contained dozens of digital audio files, each labeled by location: Fairfax Asylum, Birchwood Avenue, Route 11, Pine Hollow Creek, and a folder titled Marsh Recordings. She pressed play. The sound that filled her office wasn't static. It was breathing. Point 2. The first file replayed a faint female voice repeating a name, Holloway. The second featured rhythmic knocking, perfectly matching the sequence from the Wainwright farmhouse case. 3, pause, 2. When Dana layered the sounds into her editing software, something happened. The waveforms formed a spiral pattern, just like the one on the package. She didn't believe in supernatural coincidences, but when she played the mixed file back, she heard her own voice whispering her name, even though she hadn't recorded anything. The speakers crackled, and through the distortion came a phrase that froze her blood: "You've opened the archive." 3. She began cross-referencing missing persons reports tied to the coordinates listed in the file names. There were 43 in total, spanning 30 years, all in regions connected by underground water systems. Fairfax's foundation. Birchwood's drains. Route 11's flooded basements. Pine Hollow's creeks. Even Elena Marsh's suburban block had a storm channel running beneath it. The link wasn't ghosts or curses, it was water. Water as a conductor for memory. Water that carried sound, and something inside it that listened back. Holloway hadn't died in the asylum fire, Dana realized. He had found a way to transfer consciousness through recorded frequencies, binding fear into the flow of water. Point 4. The deeper she searched, the more the world around her began to warp. Faucets turned on by themselves. Her laptop emitted faint whispers whenever she opened the audio files. At night, her neighbors complained of hearing a woman crying through the plumbing, her voice traveling from one sink to another. Dana recorded the sound, only to find her own breathing syncing perfectly with the cry. She stopped drinking tap water. She stopped sleeping near pipes. But one evening, while editing her article draft, the screen froze. A video feed activated on its own, showing live footage from her apartment bathroom. The faucet was running. A shape was rising slowly from the drain. Point 5. She never filed the article. The next morning, her landlord found her office empty, coffee still warm. Her computer screen displayed a single open document titled, "The Spiral Archives, Draft 1." The text ended mid-sentence, "It's not haunting, it's collecting," followed by 10,000 lines of random characters forming the spiral symbol. Authorities drained her apartment's plumbing system during the investigation. When they opened one of the pipes, they found a strip of wet paper caught in the curve, the missing asylum intake page. The signature at the bottom had changed. It no longer read Maeve Lennox. It read Dana Croft. A month after journalist Dana Croft vanished, a small-town maintenance worker named Evan Carver was sent to clean the municipal reservoir outside of Fairfax County. The water level had been dropping inexplicably for weeks, and the town's taps had begun to gurgle with air and a faint metallic taste. The locals said it was the pipes, old iron. But when Evan climbed down the concrete steps toward the water's edge, he saw something glinting just beneath the surface. It looked like a reel of tape, old and black, tangled in reeds. When he reached in to grab it, the current rippled outward, perfectly circular, and for the briefest moment, his reflection didn't move with him. It smiled.